Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee on May 20th, 2019. I am Philippe Cunningham, council member for the 4th Ward and the proud chair of this committee. With me at the dais are council members Cano, Schrader, Vice Chair Gordon, council member Johnson, and council vice president Jenkins. Please let the record reflect that we have a quorum and can conduct the business of this committee. I want to make sure to give a special thank you to the committee city staff. So I want to say thank you to our city attorney, Andrea Neff, as well as our clerk, Ken Daler, who is in for Kelly. So thank you both for all of your hard work. Colleagues, today on our agenda, we have 8 items. 5 are for consent. 3 are for discussion, in which we will have a wonderful, robust presentation from our wonderful sustainability staff. So let's go ahead and dive in with the consent agenda. First up, we have approving city council appointments to the Southside Green Zone Council. The appointees are Karen Clark, Kauswar Muhammad, Muhobo Muhammad, Vivian Rodriguez, Ariane Alvarado Rojas, Noel Navarro, Jennifer Buellman, Samara Adam, and Jose Luis Villaseñor. Second, we have the Transgender Equity Council appointments. We have the council appointments of Shore Salka, Catherine Cuerna. We have a correction on the agenda: Luna Zierner, James Van Donaldson, and Chase Bakken. We have the reappointment of Freya Richmond, and then the mayoral appointments of Hunta Williams and Aisha Jazz Sharif. Item number 3 is authorizing extension of a contract with Bridge Healthcare Partners from June through December of this year. End of December of this year to complete contracted duties. There will be no additional funding required. Item number 4 is authorizing contracts with Mad Dads for $50,000, Hennepin Theater Trust for $43,000, St. Stephen's Human Services for $35,470, and Green Minneapolis for $24,755 for an amount not to exceed a total of $153,280 for specifically designated strategies for downtown violence prevention. And our final consent item is authorizing the submittal of a grant application to the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota for their Health Power People Organizing and Working for Equitable Results funding initiative for funds to support identifying and advancing policy changes to reduce the availability and consumption of sugary drinks and increase the availability of consumption of healthier alternatives. I move approval of these 5 items, but I will pause to see if there are any comments from my colleagues. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I am just curious about the council appointment process. I'm looking at the Southside Green Zone, and it appears that, you know, this body, this advisory committee, I think, it's made up of residents from Ward 6 and 9, but the South Side encompasses much more than that. I'm just curious, what's the process for these appointments?
Yes, thank you. Do we have, Kelly's not here, but can you speak to this?
Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, the process has been quite extensive on this, actually, and Councilmember Cano has been very involved in this as well too. We started taking applications in late 2018, and we did get some approval of Southside Green Zone Council folks prior to this point in time. We were looking here to be able to expand the diversity of underrepresented areas. So this is not the full council that's being appointed at this point in time. We had a partial appointment at that time, which does include more members from the different neighborhoods. So we tried to go across different geographic areas to make sure that all of the areas are being covered, as well as to be able to include as much diversity and representation of communities of color.
Okay. How many people are represented on the South Side Green Zone Council? You said it's larger than this?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, I believe it is 18 members that are on the council. What's that? I'm sorry. I'm corrected. Stand corrected. It's 20. We've shifted it around a little bit, and I apologize for that. So it's a total of 20 members that are on the council. This is the second round. We're looking at adding some youth folks as well too, so they'll have some mentorship with adults on the council as well, with some specific sort of training and community engagement. And we've also hired a facilitator to be part of this as well, to help fully expand on a draft work plan that was developed as well.
So just to be clear, it's it follows the normal boards and commissions process that we utilize for all of our other advisory boards and committees?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, that is correct. We follow the standard approval and appointment process.
Thank you.
I would also like to note that the Southside Green Zone has specific boundaries. It does not encompass the entire South Side. So there are specific boundaries, which is why you would see a concentration of Ward 6 and Ward 9, is because those are determined based on pollution, historical pollution. Can you speak to the boundaries and why they are what they are? And if you know where they are, that would be appreciated. I don't have it. I don't have it exactly in my brain where it is.
Yeah,
so.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, it does go down to approximately Lake Street. And you've got it, yeah, we could pull up the boundaries in it, but it includes a large section of sort of Cedar Riverside, a little bit of Seward, most of Phillips community is in there, a little bit, kind of ends right around Lake Street, and includes Ventura Village as well too. It was based on really overall the impact of environmental injustice or decisions that were made that impacted a community and affected their health and their wealth and basically their abilities to be able to succeed and be prosperous within that community. So there was a number of different factors that were included in that, but it did include, percentage of low-income families, environmental impacts from, like I say, over the last century or more, and really try to do a focus specifically to correct and remediate that environmental injustice over time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon.
Well, I did find the map of it here. I'm pretty sure that it only includes the 9th and the 6th ward. I don't think it goes into the 8th or the 2nd at all. So, but the map I found doesn't have the ward boundaries synced up with it. But I'll send you the map of the Green Zone itself. But as I recall, it has 2 wards that are included in it.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the work that city staff have done to really fortify this process and make sure that it is a very diverse slate of applicants. So we have very visible representation from the American Indian, the East African, the Latino community, and I did want to point out that the Southside Green Zones and the Northside Green Zones was established years ago, and the demographics and the data and the geography of it is defined through a specific scientific method of identifying the areas of the city that have the highest levels of pollution and overburdened communities, in addition to the city's most racially diverse areas, as well as the most low-income areas of the city. So there is a sort of method to the madness, if you may, and I really appreciate city staff who have driven this project up to where it is today, and I look forward to seeing it come to full fruition in the future. So thank you all for the support.
Great, thank you. A couple items that I would like to speak to myself is I'm excited about the Transgender Equity Council appointments, getting that up and running this year. Really excited to see the work that comes out of this group of folks, very talented folks coming to the table. So I'm very, very grateful for the work that will be done through this entity. And then also, for the violence prevention work, this money was designated in the 2019 budget at the end of last year, earmarked for specifically downtown strategies. And so I'm really excited that it's being brought forward before council, that we're going to be able to support folks on the ground like Mad Dads who are doing amazing violence prevention work. That was the intention for that funding, and so I'm glad to see it coming to fruition. So with that, I have made a motion to approve these 5 items. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and those items are passed. Now we are moving on to our discussion items. So we have 3 items that are going to be up for discussion. The first is going to be receiving and filing an update on the progress to date of a community-wide 100% renewable electric blueprint. Then we're going to be following that up with a discussion about transfer of 2019 sustainability franchise fee funds. And then the last will be transfer funding to CPED to support the development of passive housing. So we'll go ahead and kick it off talking about our 100% renewable electric blueprint. We have our Sustainability Director, Mr. Havey. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you, council members, for the opportunity to come and talk with you today. We've got a lot of information to share about where we're going in regards to getting achieving our goal of 100% renewable electricity. So what I thought I'd do is start off with just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about so that we can kind of set the stage and be able to go a little bit deeper in some of these areas. So we're going to take a look at a snapshot of our current city emissions. We're going to look at what our overall resolution goals were, and there were quite a few of them as part of this process. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to look at capacity and forecasting of our energy needs going forward in 2030 in light of all the changes that are happening within our electric grid. We're going to be talking about what are really some of the barriers to our success, and there's quite a few of them, but there's opportunities to be able to overcome those and be able to address those. We also want to talk about what our current strategies are that we're doing right now actively today and what we can do in the future. And then we want to talk about how we make decisions about what kind of strategies we're going to be enacting in the future. Our community engagement component of this. It's a little bit about our Bloomberg resources that we have, some other cities that are doing projects that are similar to this effort, and then really a timeline for completion of this particular project. So what this is our latest greenhouse gas emissions chart, and what it shows is that we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions in the citywide activities by more than 20% over our base year of 2006. Most of this information is, most of this reduction is coming actually from the decarbonization of the electric grid. We are seeing quite a shift from our fossil fuel-based electricity generation to renewable-based electricity generation, but it is also something where it's not happening fast enough to be able to achieve this goal. And we also need to address the fact that approximately 20% of our current electricity citywide comes from our 2 nuclear plants at Monticello and Prairie Island. This is a chart that shows the specifics about what sector our emissions are coming from. So as you can see, it's approximately 36% coming from electricity consumption. So we continue to have a very large amount of our GHG emissions coming from there. Our natural gas, or sometimes I like to refer to it as utility gas. After all, oil and coal are actually natural as well too, if you look at it. But the point is, they're fossil fuels. They are emitting carbon that was sequestered for millions of years, and this is another, one of those things that we have to sort of frame things a little bit different in our narrative. So utility gas consumption comes from about 35%, and then our on-road transportation is another 26%. So as we are shifting from using less utility gas and using less fuels for transportation, we are actually shifting much of that load onto electricity. So it becomes much more important for us to be able to look at how do we decarbonize that electric grid. And that's exactly what the point of this resolution is. So the resolution has a number of, as you can see, a lot of different areas here that we're looking at. We want to identify the impacts on the climate action plan and how the climate action plan is going to be affected going forward in the future. We want to look at how we can expand and propose new policies that achieve these particular blueprints. We need to identify financial resources that are available and costs that are incurred as a result of making this transition away from fossil fuels. We need to look at what our proposed timeline is. How do we get from where we are today in 2019 to 2030, where we're at 100% renewables? There might be some legislative changes, things that have to happen that are different than what we're doing today, and we may need to have some regulatory changes. So identifying what those options might be and proposing particular legislative changes. Identifying the impacts to each of the different sectors that I talked about is going to be important as well too. Specifically, how do we engage people to really buy into, to support the efforts that we're doing to really accelerate the work that can happen here. We also have to focus on equitable strategies. How are we going to do this in a way that doesn't burden communities that already have a high energy burden or are really facing high energy costs? They want to be able to participate as much as anybody else, but we're not going to be able to shift costs onto families that are already paying a significant amount of their monthly income and energy costs. We're looking for ways to engage workforce training and development opportunities, community wealth building, community investment. How do we look at creating career pathways and things like that? We'll talk a little bit more about that because we are doing some things this summer that are really interesting about career pathways and renewable and energy efficiency. How can these strategies help improve community health, increase resilience, and ultimately, over time, reduce the energy costs because we're not going to be paying for fuel costs in here. And then, of course, we want to identify how we can work with our partners in the Clean Energy Partnership, how we can work with our neighbors in the green zones to be able to identify strategies that are very specifically guided in those particular areas. So this is a graph that really depicts kind of the numbers, the logistics behind how we need to plan for the future load that we're going to see coming from the electricity sector. And this is a graph that we've been working with the Rocky Mountain Institute and the World Resources Institute on, which are part of technical support being provided to the city through the Bloomberg ACCC grant. And what it shows on the left-hand side in the 2018 baseline is that the non-renewable energy components make up about 2/3 of the overall total grid demand of electricity in Minneapolis, the green being the renewable energy sector. We're looking at really focusing on how to reduce our overall energy demand through energy efficiency strategies and being able to work with people to be able to basically take different options. For example, the work that's being done with the Comp Plan 2040 is looking at alternative transportation options. It can significantly reduce our demand for electricity, even if you have an electric car, because you're walking or you're taking a bike or you're taking public transit. We're also looking at doing some deep energy retrofits for buildings. Many of you were here for our report on the residential energy disclosures, and our goal there is to see 20% energy reductions over a 5-year period of time across our benchmarked buildings, so more than 1,000 buildings. So this number, the gray area, comes from the energy efficiency potential that we have. It's part of a study that was completed last year by the Center for Energy and the Environment. So if we're able to reduce our energy demand, then the remainder of those particular options are to look for ways that the city can facilitate more renewable energy for the community. It also includes the more decarbonized grid, and then it's also really looking at maximizing on-site solar within the city, which will be an embedded component of this particular plan. So those are really the sort of how we're going to look at it, and over time these numbers are going to adjust, but what we hope to be able to do is be able to zero in on specific strategies that can get us to the point where we're at 100% renewable electric.
All right, Mr. Hayes, if I can, we have Councilmember Gordon.
Yes.
Well, we were looking at that last slide. You mentioned earlier that we rely a lot on nuclear power, so that's considered clean energy in this slide.
That's correct. Yeah.
So how much of the 1,070? That's renewable? Yeah, 1,076.
It's
Do you
part
think
of that
it is?
2711, I'm sorry,
Oh, it's part of the 2711
correct.
non-renewable, so then it's also part of the 823 on the other side?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, that's correct.
Okay, great. So at least I appreciate this being tracked along with the other undesirable sources.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we've got a number of barriers and challenges, some headwind facing us, and they are, some of them in a positive way we can look at them, but they continue to be barriers to be able to achieve that. So for example, we are going to be seeing a lot of growth in the for electricity. We've got EVs that are coming. I think we're really going to be looking at a tipping point here in the next 5 years. There's many car manufacturers that are basically shifting their efforts to EVs from sedans. There's an electric pickup truck that I just read over the weekend is coming out. That's going to be able to go up to 300 miles on a charge. We're going to see a tremendous change out in our electricity because of demand increases. These also include things like being able to switch over to heat pumps rather than using a natural gas furnace. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of increase in demand, but that's a barrier. We have a phase out of a number of renewable energy incentives. The solar rewards standard, for example, solar rewards funds are ending in 2021. So we hope to be able to continue those. We're looking at expanding them and being able to get another year. That's part of a legislative strategy at the state. The phase out of the 30% federal tax credit, that is actually going to phase down to 10% for commercial solar installations by 2022 and 0% for residential. So we're really going to have to see prices for solar to continue to come down in order to make up for those financial incentives going away. We are going to continue to have existing and potentially future fossil fuel investments by Xcel Energy. They are looking at purchasing a 600 megawatt natural gas plant in Mankato, and which the city is taking a position against that at the PUC, but there is continued investment in fossil fuel infrastructure. There's a number of different things happening on the PUC level against large commercial solar. Really, the rate that's being set in the city of Minneapolis is being affected by this. When there's larger scale solar projects, they are given a certain rate, but at this point, it's called the capacity factor, is only good for a number of years, and it can change dramatically. So being consistent on really our commercial solar rate design. We've got significant caps on our net metering, which is the ability for folks to be able to put power on the grid and be paid the retail price. We think that net metering cap at 1 megawatt should be increased so that commercial folks can get the same rate by putting solar on the grid that they get for taking energy off the grid. And we would like to see, we've got some challenges with the current integrated, vertically integrated monopoly utility model in that it doesn't allow a lot of opportunity for us to be independent on a number of our solar and other renewable energy purchases, and really requires us to consistently be part of a partnership with them in order to be able to move any of our overall agendas and goals forward. So that can be challenging as well too. There's some good news. We've been doing a lot of great things. As you know, the city of Minneapolis has been very active with programs and strategies. We have very strategic use of our franchise fees, which we'll have an opportunity to talk about later, which help us with energy efficiency and renewables. We have a successful green business cost share and green housing cost share program, which is focusing on energy efficiency in those two sectors. We have the continued decarbonization of the grid. Xcel Energy just this morning announced that they're going to be closing all of the remaining coal plants that they have in the upper Midwest by 2030. This is sort of a build up to this plan they have going on right now, which is called their Integrated Resource Plan. And today they were unveiling what the actual grid mix is going to look like starting in 2030 in preparation for a filing in July with the Public Utilities Commission. But they are being fairly aggressive on this, though not as aggressive enough to achieve the goal that we have in front of us today. So we're still going to look at having to have 40% of our energy being covered by additional renewable above the 60% that Xcel will be providing by 2030. 20% of that is going to be related to nuclear. The other 20% is basically going to be coming from utility natural gas plants. So we're going to have to look at ways to have our own renewable energy cover that additional amount in order to achieve this resolution's goal. We've got great utility conservation improvement programs, but we'd like to see those continue to expand. We'd like to see the continuation of solar rewards, but it's been active and running and will be for the next 2 years. The federal tax credit, of active community solar gardens program. Again, that's somewhat been under attack as well too. It's almost been too successful. That's been the problem. If it was just a little small program, it wouldn't have been an issue, but it's been very successful and really put the state of Minnesota on the map as one of the nation's leaders in solar. And we also have Renewable Connect and WindSource, which are opt-in renewable energy programs. But as many of you know, those are programs that are all at premium. So you're paying 1 or 2 cents more or 10 to 20% more of your energy bill in order to have that renewable energy for your home or business. And then we are been actively working with a couple of organizations, Solar United, as well as the Midwest Renewable Energy Association on solar group purchase programs, and that's been quite successful as well too. So some interesting future strategies that we're looking at is that we'd really, and these are, I'm going to break it down into city interventions and then things that the city can work with others or encourage others to do. And the city interventions are really about increasing the ability for us to scale up our green business cost share. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the second presentation, but we have tremendous demand for these energy efficiency programs, and our supply of leverage dollars are already used up, in the first couple of rounds out of 4. And so we could easily double, triple our commitment to the green business cost share. And this is really without doing any heavy advertising or outreach. This is just sort of word of mouth and people seeing it on the website. So we have a tremendous demand on energy efficiency, especially these funding go to small businesses, to smaller multifamily properties, things like that. And of course, they also support our 4D affordable housing program. So green business cost share needs more dollars. Expanded city enterprise participation in community gardens. We're looking at doing this and trying to expand our efforts in there, but we need to have space, and we, again, have limits. We have a cap of only 1 megawatt currently on community solar gardens, and the subscriber, single subscriber, can only have 40% of that subscription. So we're limited to 400 kW, which means we have to participate in many dozens, 100 different community solar gardens in order to really have an impact on our renewable energy portfolio. We want to look at ways that we can fully utilize our facilities and our property to maximize out our renewable energy, especially solar on buildings, properties. Brian Milberg has been working with our office quite extensively to look at the water utility and being able to add 3 to 5 megawatts up there on underutilized property. We're going to be adding 100 megawatts on the new public service center as well in 2020 when that opens. And so we've got a lot of options, but there's still a lot of opportunity yet to go. And part of it is we don't have the funding to be able to roll out these big programs.
Can you please explain, can you translate what a megawatt looks like in terms of, so that somebody watching at home understands how big or how little that is?
Okay. Well, it's metric. Kilowatt is 1,000 watts, and a megawatt is 1,000,000 watts. A typical home uses, and it's measured in hours, so how much energy used per hour. So a kilowatt hour or a megawatt hour is how much people are used to seeing maybe on their bill, or at least in the kilowatt hour. So a typical home uses about 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy on a monthly basis. So that would be a bill of around $100. Maybe folks use less than that in apartments or smaller homes. So a megawatt is going to be 1,000 of those particular homes. So you're going to be, it's a pretty grand scale. But so it's, somewhere in that neighborhood, you're going to be using that much more for each of the different, for houses. Like I said, in a year, you're going to maybe use 1.2 megawatt hours of time, 12 times 1,000 kilowatt hours. So does that help at all?
Yes, I think that would be, I just want to make sure that we were speaking to the public as well, to be able to understand how does renewable energy actually show up in their everyday lives. And is the policy from Excel that cap of 1 megawatt, was that set by Excel?
Mr. Chair, it was set in negotiations, but the state of Minnesota actually has that in legislation. So
Okay.
Excel was part of the negotiation. So we would have to go to the legislature, as we have proposed this year, to increase that up. And there have been other bills that have attempted to increase that limit.
Great, thank you so much.
So we are also looking at ways that we can do what are called virtual PPAs or rec purchasing, though that's not adding necessarily to the amount of renewable energy that's out there. This may be an existing renewable energy facility, so it's something to be considered. We're also looking at ways that we can align across all of our city departments. I think what's going on with transportation, of course, what happened with the comp plan and what we're doing with CPED on passive housing, all of those are ways that we're sort of crossing over and utilizing different departments to be able to expand and be able to support our renewable energy and sustainability goals. And so the city's working really great across lines like that, and I'm really excited about the work that's happening, especially in transportation, on some of the unique things to reduce carbon from the transportation sector. And then I also think it's really important for us to look at innovative strategic ways to expand the use of the franchise fee to really be able to align how much carbon's being produced, and be able to potentially reward folks for reducing their carbon use and reinvesting dollars that are based on carbon emissions in order to really help facilitate energy efficiency and carbon reduction as well too. And we have some ability to be flexible on our franchise fee.
I have a question or comment from Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the renewable energy credits, which is something that can be traded to allow somebody to burn more unrenewable energy or whatever, fossil fuels. When we have our own city-owned renewables, are we keeping those energy credits, or are we using those to finance our projects? Do you know?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, we are keeping the renewable energy credits when we own those facilities. However, there are other options where we do sometimes are participating in a community solar garden, for example, that the rate that's tied to it doesn't necessarily mean we get to keep the REC, even though we're receiving the energy and paying for it. It's retained by Xcel Energy as part of their portfolio.
I understand that. I think that's one of the benefits of owning our own, is that we don't do that. Thank you.
Okay, so some interesting future strategies that we have that are not specific to the city actually doing these activities, but really encouraging others to take action and really getting the private sector involved. New construction major renovation ordinance. We're very active this year at the state legislature to pass Sustainable Buildings 2030. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. As of the closing of the session tonight at midnight, it's unlikely. However, we're hopeful to be able to bring together a stakeholder process and bring the parties together to draft legislation that we can all support in 2020. But basically, that's SB 2030 would be legislation that would allow cities to opt in to have a stretch code based on this current SB 2030 program, which really creates a long-term glide path to carbon neutrality by 2030. The overall goal would be able to have all new buildings of a certain size, say 50,000 square feet or larger, be required to be carbon neutral beginning in 2030, as well as any major renovations of buildings that also are of a certain size that expend more than 50% of their value on a major renovation, to also spend the money to make those buildings carbon neutral. So that's a big effort that we would love to see. We have a sustainable building policy. Right now, the city has some sustainable building policies around affordable housing, around city-owned properties, but it does not encompass all the buildings that might be built. And certainly a lot of our multifamily buildings are not falling under a sustainable building policy because they are not receiving any specific funds from the city, nor do they have any requirements to meet certain energy efficiency standards. we really want to look at how we can do more electrification and how that can become a way to reduce our dependence on utility gas. Make requirements on lower emissions for overall buildings. That's really somewhat what we're trying to do with our benchmarking initiatives. And then look at ways that we can develop and see the development of net zero energy or net zero emission standards for our passive houses, which we are starting to pilot as well too. Solar plus storage, looking at ways that we can have renewable energy stored so that we can meet peak demand and not have to have natural gas peaker plants. Incorporate transportation mobility hubs within a half mile of every resident of the city of Minneapolis as a way to really take out the need for the first mile, last mile, and to have that car available for those once a week or twice a week trips. Really look at ways like Complan 2040 is around increasing density in transit corridors, and expand our urban agricultural and local food policies. We have initiated, as many of you know, a food action plan, which is really looking at reducing our carbon emissions from food through food policies and food actions. And then also there's a new program that Excel has been talking about, which is a certified renewable energy program, which basically would be a kind of an opt-in program. They're in the early stages of developing it, but the ability to be able to buy into a program that's strictly renewable energy. Those are some of the potential strategies that we can encourage others to take. And then there's also future legislative action, as I mentioned, as well too. So the SB 2030 bill is really important to look at. The ability for our to look at how we might be able to aggregate our community choice, which is really about having this ability of the city to bring together neighbors and purchase renewable energy, but still utilize the utility that we have, transmission and distribution network, but the power itself will be coming from 100% renewable. This is allowed in about a half a dozen states around the country, but it currently is not allowed in Minnesota. As Governor Walz wanted to do, I think we should be supporting an increase in the renewable energy standards statewide. This is not just about the city, but really about the planet, and we need to have everybody engaged in this. Currently, we're at 25% with 1.5% for solar. By 2025, we're going to blow that out of the water. The utility will meet that actually by next year. So we need to really increase that to keep the pressure on. We want to expand the net metering size, as I talked about. That is a legislative change that we have to. And then another area where we want to look at is we'd really like to see the pricing of energy incorporate the societal effects and the societal cost of greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, what we regulate sulfur dioxide, nitric oxide, many other kinds of pollutants, particulate matter, but we do not regulate we do not price carbon dioxide, which makes up the mass majority of pollutants that are emitted. So looking at ways that we can do that would have a significant impact on really the incentives people have to reduce their overall carbon footprint. And the Minnesota PUC did increase the societal cost of carbon emissions, which Excel has to incorporate, but the range is tremendous. It goes from about $9 per metric equivalent ton to $43 per metric equivalent ton, and it varies depending on what kind of sources, et cetera. So we need to come up with a specific amount that we can agree to and be able to utilize that in decision making so that things that are more carbon intensive are less likely to be invested in as compared to those that are carbon free. I know this is taking a little bit longer than we wanted in here. I apologize. We've got a lot. This is a very in-depth concept, but in a lot of different options on here. But a lot of opportunities for utilities to support this from some of the things that we're doing, such as our conservation improvement program and looking to increase those, more renewable energy in the grid, inclusive financing, which many of you have talked about and heard about. Is something we're continuing. The time of use rates that can align with renewables and EV charging, that is really ideal. We're looking at doing a pilot. Obviously, the Excel is going to be rolling out a pilot late this year, and will be a 2-year pilot looking at time of use rates with the goal of reducing both energy usage and costs and being able to shift the peak demand. We'd like to have a robust community solar program continue. That has been under attack in some circles. We'd like to have expanded consumer participation in different programs and be able to help with that. We'd like to explore potential for what are called sleeve PPAs, which are renewable energy that's purchased from a private developer, but then through agreement with the utility, the power is brought into this distribution grid for the use by the city and the city residents. This is something that's being looked at in a number of other cities, such as Salt Lake City, Park City, Utah, and a couple of other places. Denver is starting to look at this as an option as well, and they have XL Energy too. And then the potential for what's called a green tariff, or the ability for people to get a price for renewable energy that is just like their price per kilowatt hour for their current electricity, but strictly have it be a price for 100% renewable energy, and have that be basically a separate portfolio that is managed by the utility. So in order to really come up with what is the best way that we should do, we're going to be looking at prioritizing and ranking strategies. This is just an example based on sort of the principles and goals of the resolution, but we're also going to be looking at this to get community input, engagement with partners on this, and to be able to really develop a strategy for how do we prioritize which one of these aspects we're going to be focusing on, whether it be sleeve PPAs or virtual PPAs or many of the other different options. Really, this is part of what we're going to be asking for input from community and other technical experts on how we can really weigh the different options in order to come up with the priorities for this plan to implement. And then we are receiving technical assistance on forecasting and many other things in regards to our Bloomberg ACCC grant. They have been actively supportive of looking at ways that we can see a difference in our renewable mix with Excel, what's basically legal, legislative, those kind of technical things. And they've been also helping a couple of other cities that are involved in this with the ACCC group, and that's Denver, who just recently issued a RFQ for a consultant to work on a very similar 100% renewable energy roadmap. And then Salt Lake City, this is a really interesting concept in which they were able to go with 5 cities around Utah to the legislature and get approval to basically create a standalone series of 5 different cities who are going to get 100% of their renewable energy, or get their energy 100% renewable, but the utility is going to help facilitate bringing that together. So they have Rocky Mountain Power, which is similar to XL in that it's a vertically integrated electrical power company, but they've been able to work with the legislature, and that's a very conservative state. So if I think Utah can lead the way on that one, we have some good options to take a look at how we can make that happen here as well too. It's Utah HB 411 is the name of the Energy Act. So next steps, we're really looking at defining our engagement strategy, and this is something we're working with Bloomberg as well too. We're looking at how we can get people to buy in on concept. How can we identify personal activities and options for people? How do we identify what the challenges are and overcome those to be able to lay out a solution? And how can we create partnerships with other organizations? We also want to utilize our standing advisory committees, SEAC and EVAC and the green zones, and then also hold a series of listening sessions to engage representatives, Minneapolis residents, specifically around low-income communities and communities of color, things that where we might not be able to get as much representation or feedback or insight if from our general standing advisory committees. And then we want to be able to engage, obviously, XL Energy, as well as our Clean Energy Partnership in supporting these efforts as well too. Don't know exactly how that is, but we're working through a series of work plans, and we will continue to have this be a priority for us on those work plans. And we really want to be able to ask critical questions about how we are going to achieve our overall principles. So the timeline is that we're going to continue to conduct some analysis here in the near term to be able to look at load forecasting, engage stakeholders over the summer and into the fall, present a blueprint going forward in Q4 of 2019 to the City Council, and then be able to start looking at our specific actions and work plan implementation, as well as engagement strategies to get people engaged in those strategies starting in 2020. And that's the update report on the 100% blueprint.
Great, thank you so much. Do I have any questions or comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Gordon.
It's great to see this and great to see all the work and efforts that's been put into it. I know partnership's been a little bit involved, but I really appreciate all the work that's been going on behind the scenes. And I know that my office has been involved in some of these discussions and some of the work, and particularly with finance. And in the presentation, we saw a couple things mentioned: inclusive financing and the franchise fee and green tariff and some of these concepts. And I understand that in discussions that we've certainly had our own finance team, finance department and director interested in digging into some of these things, but they seem to be at a point where they might want some outside expertise and a little bit of help. Would you say that's true?
Councilmember Cunningham and Gordon, yeah, that's true. These are very new concepts and they're complicated. So yeah, we definitely could use some outside expertise.
Well, that was my understanding too. So there's a staff direction that committee members should have before you, which would be direct finance, sustainability, and health department staff to work with a consultant to explore financial planning to support and accelerate the implementation of its climate action plan and associated programs, including through an exploration of financial strategies being utilized by other cities in the United States, maybe a couple that you mentioned, and in other countries, and report back to this committee and also Ways and Means by March of 2020 with options for further consideration. And so I'd like to move that staff direction as part of this, and hopefully the timeline fits. I know you want your blueprint this fourth quarter. Maybe there'll be a little work that can be informing the blueprint as we go forward.
All right, Councilmember Gordon has made a motion with a staff direction. Has this been sent over to the city clerk as well?
Yes.
We're all squared away? Awesome. All right, so is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and that motion passes. Thank you so much, and now we have Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you very much, Chair Cunningham. Director Havey, a couple things. First, just want to thank you and your office for all your work. Just to highlight one thing that's just been a pleasure. Well, we didn't get there this year with SB 2030 on the state level. It was fascinating to see and just encouraging to see how many cities across the state actually jumped on and are supportive of this for their very own reasons. It was something working with the state before. Sometimes when Minneapolis is on that list, it's not always a positive, but it was nice to see us start the lead, and especially working with Councilmember Gordon's office and my own, have us kind of start to take the back seat because it's really gaining momentum for very real reasons. And I think just to move on that kind of line, I mean, the more and more we learn, our best efforts will not get there. Like seeing those numbers, it's very deflating. And so I have a motion to work, and I'll just read that in a second, but I think that just the points I want to make, that we really need to be looking at all options, because right now with our best ideas, we have no backup plan. Picking one of them limits us in a severe way, and the more we learn about the efforts we're trying to do, we're limited by the state to our own detriment. So we need to be able to at least explore things and see what will work here in the city. So, yep, I'm going to move a motion. All of my colleagues have a copy of that. I'll read it really quickly. Just directing sustainability and intergovernmental relations staff to explore what legislation and regulatory changes would be required to enable community choice aggregation in Minnesota, and report back to the Intergovernmental Relations Committee by December of 2019.
All right. Councilmember Schrader has made a motion to direct staff. Are there any questions or comments? I'll just add that I'm really grateful that you have brought this forward, because as the presentation was happening, that was a question that I had, and was hoping that we would get some work done. So thank you so much for bringing it forward. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. All right. Thank you so much, Director Havey. Next up, we have item number 7, which is transfer of 2019 sustainability franchise fee funds to the health department for green cost share and urban trees program. Will you be giving that as well, or Patrick?
Mr. Chair, I'll be giving that as well, too.
All right.
I promise to be shorter this time.
All right.
All right.
It's all exciting, no worries.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I know you all are very interested in this. So this is really part of our expanded effort that we did. We have our first full year of our franchise fee increase, which was 0.5% on electricity and utility gas revenues. And this brought in an additional approximately $2.8 million to the city of Minneapolis. And we've got a number of programs that we are supporting. And I want to talk about those a little bit today and request authorizations to transfer those to our city department partners. So our 2019 plan, we really looked at how we can make minimal alterations to the programs that are very successful already. I'm not going to talk about all of the programs, just the ones that we're highlighting today, but a couple of other ones just real quickly are our 0% loan financing, which is about to be coupled with our on-bill payment, loan payment options with CenterPoint Energy, as well as our low and no-cost Home Energy Squad support as well too. So those are an example of some successful programs. So we continue to fund those. We want to be able to move forward programs that are showing great success. We have a landlord engagement program that is focusing on smaller, up to 20 unit apartment buildings within the green zones, and we have a specific outreach person who works for Guardian Property Management, someone who's in the business, reaching out to minority, mostly minority business or property owners within the green zones to look for ways that we can support them to do energy efficiency upgrades. It's been very successful. We've actually met with 40 different property owners, and that's been moving forward. So we did continue to move that forward. We want to be able to leverage city programs, resources, and staff and not be able to basically create our own freestanding programs. So we work very closely with CPED and the health department, for example, to be able to support their programs. We want to leverage special grants, programs, or matching funding whenever possible. Again, Green Cost Share is a great example of being able to provide matching funding to support our energy efficiency areas. And then we also want to be able to look at innovative projects that are really going to be the future of where we want to go. And as I mentioned, I think it's really important for us to set our sights on carbon neutrality for all new buildings starting in 2030, if not before. We really need it. We can do that. It's completely possible. We just have to be able to give a long enough lead time so that our developers and others can really be able to make that happen. So that's our kind of guiding principles in our plan. So today I want to talk about transferring funding over to our Green Cost Share housing and supporting our Lead and Healthy Homes. The Lead and Healthy Homes program serves lead-poisoned children and families with childhood asthma. Anytime that you're looking at making improvements to a home, we'd love to be able to go in there, one-time visit, address lead and unhealthy air quality in there, as well as be able to address energy efficiency. And those two meet very well together. They really mesh really well together. Improvements to the air sealing and the air quality of a home also makes the home much more energy efficient. So reducing energy costs as well as making the home healthier and safer. So we had this program was started or has been going on, Lead and Healthy Homes, for a while, but we provided funding last year of $139,000 in 2018. We'd like to increase that to $275,000 in 2019. And we're able to leverage basically double our funding. So $1 of franchise fee funding will leverage an additional federal dollars, so we're able to double our impact in those particular homes. And we are looking at 92% of the participants in the program are at 80% or below median income. So these are really folks that can use that support and reduce their energy burden while they're getting a healthier home. Another great program is the 4D program, in which we're really working with property owners to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. And this program's been very successful, as many of you know, to be able to keep our housing costs down and maintain affordable housing. Again, this is one of those efforts where we're already doing outreach to these landlords. We have the ability to go out there now with some additional funding for energy efficiency to do energy evaluations and then propose changes to their property. In many cases, we're able to fund up to 90% of those energy efficiency improvements, maintaining long-term affordability for those properties and making sure that they remain affordable to the renters and tenants and all those folks as well. We're looking at here, this is also part of that $275,000 that's talked about in the Lead and Healthy Homes. Then we have the Green Business Cost Share Program. This is really working with organizations, again, that invest in energy efficiency. It also includes solar, both group buy solar for residential as well as business solar. There's been last year 29 solar projects, 14 commercial energy efficiency projects, a passive solar pilot project, and even one 2.5 million gallon water heating efficiency project. There was demand in excess of $1.2 million in 2018, and we now have even more demand for that funding in 2019. So we're proposing to increase the funding from $425,000 in 2018 to $825,000 in 2019. We are also been active in looking at workforce and education and career pathways. We're looking at providing training and STEM careers pathways for up to 200 young people from Minneapolis to go through a summer-long training program, which will have different on-site training, different instructors. We're also going to have an urban scholar from health as well as from sustainability participating in this and providing feedback on what things are going well and how to really refine the curriculum in order to make it better and be able to expand it in 2020. We're proposing here that this said no funding in 2018, but we're supporting $100,000 to be invested in to support these 200 young people to go through energy efficiency, renewable energy training throughout the summer.
I want to jump in real quick. If you can go back one slide. Will it be located at particular schools, or will it be at a central location that kids will come to from all over the city?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to see if, okay. Mr. Chair, I'm working with Patrick Hanlon here from the Director of Environmental Programs. It's going to be at both. So it is working with the Minneapolis Public Schools, but we are actually looking at utilizing a couple of properties that can be retrofitted and made available for education within the Northside Green Zone, for example. And so we're going to have some on-site related training as well too at solar installations of particular buildings that are going through energy efficiency upgrades.
And this is going to happen this summer?
That's
Well, please let us know as council members when recruitment season is so that we can get the word out and get our kids there too. So thank you.
Thank you. And then our urban tree program, which basically handed out over 800 trees over the weekend, this last weekend. This is something that is part of the sustainability budget, but again, it is funding that is designated in the coordinator's office and sustainability, but is something that the health department administers. So this is something we've transferred in the last couple of years, and we're continuing to transfer the same amount to support the installation of over 800 trees in Minneapolis. And then a very unique program that we're doing is partnering with CPED's Minneapolis Homes Development Assistance Program, which provides single-family homes to low-income families by building homes on vacant lots. And one of the things that really is interesting to me is the ability to design and develop homes that are either net zero energy or at least 80% more efficient than homes that are built currently. And there's a big movement across the country and even, obviously worldwide, but Vancouver, for example, is now building passive 30-story residential buildings. So they're looking at having passive homes be the standard starting in 2020 in Vancouver. I want to make sure that we are seeing that same kind of effort made here. This is a program in which we would support basically a research study to look at 4 different certifications of passive style or net zero energy homes, as well as be able to provide additional gap financing for 6 to 10 single-family homes that are 80% less energy than a standard build home and 100% electric. And we're hoping that these will all be affordable, and some of which will also be part of a community land trust to preserve long-term affordability for those homes as well too. This is an innovative project that we're looking to transfer $180,000 to CPED to roll out with their program, which the RFPs are going to be coming out in early June. And we have not funded that in the past. So this is a kind of a unique picture of a home that was developed in Vancouver, and it's sort of the commonplace in many of the Scandinavian countries and things as well too. So today's request is to authorize transfer to the Health Department for the Green Business Cost Share, the Green Cost Share for Housing, the Energy Careers Pathways and Training, and the Urban Trees Program for $1.281 million, and then authorize transfer to CPED for the Passive House Pilot Program of $180,000.
Great, thank you. For the passive housing work, you said something about a study? Just to get a better understanding, did you say something about a study or an RFP? Because
Mr. Chair, there's two RFPs and a study. So the study is that we decided that we want to really be able to document the types of housing, including the specific architectural plans and techniques to be able to achieve 4 different net zero energy homes. There's a U.S. Passive House Standard and a European Passive House Standard. There's also a Department of Energy Net Zero Energy Ready home development, and then there's a carbon neutral home pilot program out of Madison. So we're looking at 4 different types of programs, and what we've hired a consultant to do is to be able to analyze each one of those from the standpoint of what are the differences between those, what are the benefits to each one of those, and if the city should particularly sort of hitch their wagon or promote one or the other over the other kind of program. And then we're also going to be looking at each of the developers to basically choose one of those programs and then follow that through the planning and zoning process in order to identify where we have barriers or obstacles to be able to do passive housing. Some of that has already been identified, like for example, when you have a building permit, you're looking at the square footage of the footprint of the building, but with passive homes, you have another 1.5 to 2 feet of insulation. So basically, you end up paying more money because you've got a thicker wall for a building permit in Minneapolis. We should probably be reversing that to say the more insulation will give you a little bit less building permit cost if you're going that way, because that's going to help achieve our overall goals for carbon neutrality, et cetera.
is this similar to the Green Homes North program?
Mr. Chair, it's similar to it, but it pushes the envelope even farther. But yes, it's very similar to that kind of program where we're trying to see tremendous energy reduction. It's been quite successful. This will probably see another halving of the amount of energy that the Green Homes North program has achieved.
Oh, that's great. I see that affordable housing developers is listed as a partner. Is that a barrier in the other cities, being able to keep passive housing affordable to folks maybe with lower median incomes?
Chair Cunningham, there is some incremental cost that is above what a typical home would be. We're hoping to see what that is in this study as well too. Interestingly enough, I ran into developer George Sherman, who is a large developer here in Minneapolis. He's really doing some innovative things with multifamily housing, and he is building a multifamily USA Passive House certified building in St. Paul. And he indicated that what he's seen is a 12% increase in the cost. He's attributing, though, 5% of that cost, maybe a little more, to actually just uncertainty with their general contractor as to how the development will go. They haven't done this exactly before, So they put a little bit more contingency in their budget. So he's thinking that it's going to be well under 10% as far as the incremental costs, but over the life of the property, there's going to actually be quite a bit of savings.
Great, thank you so much. Councilmember Gordon.
Do we know how much of the 180,000 is going to go for this study and how much is going to go to this 6 to 10 homes?
Chair Cunningham, Councilmember Gordon, yes, this study has a budget of $25,000, and the remainder will go to gap financing.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? All right, seeing none, we have two items in front of us for approval. So we'll take them separately since they're on the agenda separately. So I move approval of the transfer of 2019 sustainability franchise fees to the Health Department for green cost share and urban tree programs. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and that item carries. And our last item is I move approval of transfer of the 2019 Sustainability Franchise Fee Funds to CPED to support the development of passive housing. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and that item carries. That is all for our agenda. Thank you so much, Director Havey, for all of that work, as well as Patrick Hanlon for your leadership in the work as well. It's very exciting to see the work that's happening, and I'm grateful that Minneapolis has wonderful leaders and to be willing to push for us to lead the way, or at least be not too far behind leading the way. So thank you so much, and with no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.